Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to tonight's night-ending bonus, shall we? Today's first encounter. I'm a 72-year-old man, and this happened a long time ago, but I remember it so well. The background was a series of events that placed me in a mountain cabin outside of Frederick, Maryland, circa 1969 or 70. Just say my life at the time was in disarray. I had dropped out of college, my father had died very badly, and I was alienated. I needed to get my mind right. The opportunity to move to an isolated cabin to live in contempt and solitude was welcome. I had some inheritance money to pay for it. To the best of my memory, I was there 8 or 9 months. No TV, but books and a radio. I had a library card. I don't remember if there was a phone. The experience begins when a month into my stay, a female beagle showed up at my door. She was a lost dog, and I took her in. Never could train her to do anything, but I fed her, and she was sweet, if not the brightest dog. A few months in, I began to feel a presence around the cabin. Hard to describe, but it felt like someone or something was watching, and on many occasions I thought someone or something might even be looking into my cabin windows and watching us. The next phase was the shadowing or following. I knew the folk a half a mile down the lane, woods all around, and would sometimes visit them at night. Someone, something was waiting for me, and followed closely in the woods beside me in the darkness. You could hear easily footsteps in the woods, and it picked up its pace as I did. This not only happened to me, but to my younger brother who visited, and to friends, and it spooked them big time. At night, it was out there around the cabin. Here's the funny thing. I was never afraid, never felt threatened, not at all, at least early on. There was no feeling of malevolence. I had spent a good bit of my time wandering the vast areas of woodlands around me. There's a state park just up the hill, and the Frederick Municipal Forest went on for miles and miles. The whole of western Maryland was much more country than it is now. None of that development had set in yet. In our hikes, the dog and I would come across evidence of campsites, recent ones in the woods, traces of fires, old abandoned buildings that had corners that gave shelter and looked like they had been slept in. Garbage, food and drink, paper, what have you. Perhaps hunters, but much of it did not have the organized feel you would get from an experienced hunters. The last month of my stay there was when things intensified. Maybe it sensed I was preparing to leave. In the mornings, I would find small dead animals at the bottom of the front porch steps. The cabin had a small front porch, screened with a light door, and 4 wooden steps to the ground. A spotlight would illuminate the long front yard, with woods close by either side. Dead animals began to appear at the bottom of the steps many mornings. I remember small birds, then a squirrel, a rabbit, even a weasel one day. like they were offerings. I had to grab them before the dog ate them. This went on almost daily for several weeks. One night, very late, I was awoken by a sound. I lied in bed and heard something. From the porch I hopped up and hit the lights. And I saw that hound dog, who never learned to sit or stay, standing at the front door, in a perfect position. She was shaking in fear. She never barked. I heard the door slam and the footsteps down the stairs. I hit the spotlight but saw nothing. I went out. It had been on the porch at my front door, maybe trying to enter. After that, I stayed in at night more and more. The animal offerings got bigger and bigger, larger birds, possum, woodchuck. It's not funny. The final 2 gifts were legs from either horses or cows, big and bloody. One was skinned. Holy crap. The second to last day the dog left me, I could hear in the woods howling on a trail, following a scent. I looked for her in every way I could, came up the following weeks, but to no avail. She left as she came. I moved back to the Maryland suburbs of D.C., got an apartment with a friend, got a job, and moved on with my life. One day, not long after, I picked up the Washington Post, and there was an article about recent encounters with the Sykesville monster. It described a tall, yeti-like creature, fur-covered, on 2 legs, that would pick out a family or a person and give them attention. I wasn't the only one. That attention described in this article was exactly what happened to me. Following you at night, looking inside your home, gifts and so on. I was shocked. If I had turned on that spotlight and seen a Bigfoot, I may still be running. But I think I know who it was. Sykesville, Maryland was the location of the Springfield Hospital Center, a large state psychiatric hospital. It was 20 miles or so east of Frederick. Back then, many folk knew how to live in the woods. They grew up that way, country folk. I think the monster was an escaped patient, or just a free schizophrenic who lived outside. This is like all of the homeless you see in the cities now. Probably off its meds, but somehow functional and lonely. It would pick out people or families to adopt and camp in the woods. Nothing to do. He would make mischief. I think he liked me, but sensed I was leaving. I can't prove any of this, just my theory. My monster was very much of that time and place, and its behavior was what I noticed in nearly every case then. I don't think it could have survived until the 80s. Deinstitutionalization of mental hospitals threw the mentally ill out into the streets and took away the shelters of hospitals. Unprotected, the mentally ill died. That's a pretty good theory. I mean, the guy really thought about the whole thing, but the thing is the Sykesville monster had been spotted long before the 70s, 80s, and still is being cited. So, I don't know. Possible, but I'm not leaning that way. I'm leaning towards the real deal. Moving on. Today's second encounter. Last fall, my son and I were driving on US 41/M28 towards 3 Lakes in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, where we live. This beast ran across the highway near Tioga Creek. We are familiar with all the animals living here. Moose regularly cross in front of drivers, so we watched the sides of the road carefully. We were very puzzled and thought it might have been some kind of mutant wolf, and couldn't figure out what we witnessed. It ran fairly fast, about 50 feet in front of our truck. It was so strange because the front of it was much higher than its back, larger than a wolf. It didn't exactly look like a video or a drawing I see on the internet, but pretty close. The side view shape of the animal was almost like ape-shaped, with the front legs longer than the back, which made it run funny. It ran like a bear runs, with the exception of the back legs being shorter, if you can picture that. The front, from the angle I saw, looked like it must have had a wide chest. The head appeared to be wolf-like, but it was definitely not a wolf. The color was brown and black mixed. The hair seemed medium to long, like a wolf, and I remember thinking it might have had mange. Must have had patches of hair missing. I was telling my son, who was 13, about what I had found on the internet, and he gave the same description, how very strange and out of place it was. He said that this spring he saw the same type of thing on the logging road near our house. I do remember him telling me that at the time. And it was the same thing. He was riding his dirt bike. We live in an extremely remote area, and it ran across the trail. I know where he's talking about because I pick berries there, and I do get a weird feeling like something's watching me. A neighbor told me that the area is Bigfoot Central, which I didn't know or believe. But after doing further research, there are a lot of reports of strange creatures in this area that go back many, many years. Who knows what it is, but as long as it's not hurting anything, I hope it's left alone. I'm very familiar with the wildlife. I do hunt, and I know my tracks. I have not seen any strange tracks, but now I will really keep my eyes open. Today's third encounter. Imagine you're driving along a country road by yourself, dark, foggy clouds of mist hanging above the ground, too few streetlights providing too little illumination, a chilled breeze blowing seemingly like it's continuing straight down your spine. No other cars you can see, no headlights, no brake lights, you're alone. The radio cuts out and you notice there is no signal on your phone, and then you see it. Well, my experience was far from that. It was early morning in May of 2019, just before 6 a.m. The sun had just begun to rise, but it was not dark. I was heading down a country road on the outskirts of San Jose, California, on the way to the store for my morning coffee. My radio worked fine, not scary in any way, shape, or form. I had just turned down a street next to a huge open space that used to be two 18-hole golf courses, and just past that is the county park with a lake. Lots and lots of empty space. I was up the hill from that a few blocks away when I saw an animal cross the road about 200 yards ahead of me. My first thought was dog, but the proportions were wrong. Too long, too low, weird shape. I looked more intently, and my second thought was fur-covered alligator, because it was long, with a long nose/snout and low, less than a foot off the ground, despite its length of 4 or so feet from the snout to butt, exclusive of the tail. I'm having a hard time recalling what the tail looked like. I know it was present, but I don't know what it looked like. I slowed down to get as good a look as I could. It was moving quickly, but walking from my left to my right. Made a U-turn to see if I could get a better look, but the mystery critter had slunk away by now into the space between the brush. As much as I am interested in cryptid research, the idea of taking a picture occurred to me maybe 5 minutes after the event was over. In reality, the encounter didn't last long enough to have readied my phone to take a picture. So now I'm looking for a 4-foot-long plus tail, which I had a hard time making out the details of. It was dark brown, I guess is what you'd call it. Dark, but not black. Hard to describe is the best way to communicate every aspect of the animal's appearance. I didn't see any markings in its fur or hair. It was pretty much the same color, no eye shine or anything. Actually, from what I remember, nothing unusual about its eyes. I didn't get a good look at its face. It was at my 11 o'clock position, moving the left when I saw it. I did not see fangs or teeth protruding. Similarly, no tongue was visible. Its body was less than a foot from the ground, much lower than a dog's body of similar length would be unless crouched down. So that's the encounter. Not very spooky, nor very exciting, I'm afraid. However, it is the truth. To change it and make it terrifying would change it from its true experience to a fictional creepypasta. Today's fourth experience. My girlfriend and I went out to feed deer for hunting opening on November 22nd, 2008. We were in a national forest in northern Wisconsin. It was November 21st, 2008, and the time was 12:10 a.m. It was totally dark out. Light snow was falling, with the accumulation of about an inch covering the roads. The temperature was 11 degrees. The wind was blowing from the northwest with a wind chill of 0 degrees. We made a U-turn to the left onto an unfinished ATV trail in one of our 4x4 pickups heading toward last year's feed pile. I got to the bottom of the hill and backed in and parked. I got out my pistol, loaded it. I then put it in my holster. I grabbed my flashlight with 3 LED bulbs and secured it on my head. I handed her shaker LED flashlight and proceeded to back the truck, where I had 5-gallon bucket with just under 2 gallons of corn and 3 apples in it, strapped down with 2 of my ATV straps. I put down the tailgate, unstrapped the bucket, and put the tailgate up. I walked around my side and then in the front of the truck to her passenger side as she was putting mittens on. We both started to walk together, her just behind and to my right side, when we both noticed a fresh set of tracks in the snow heading downwind of us in the same direction we were walking. At first, it was not the size that caught my attention. It was, what in God's creation made these tracks? Immediately my skin crawled as I looked around with my head to see if what we just had come upon was in sight. I glanced back down in disbelief at the tracks. I was in a slight stage of shock as I looked up at her. She looked at me, and we both looked down at 4 well-formed footprints of some kind of scary track that neither of us had ever seen before. I sized my shoe beside one of the tracks and realized it was about 3 inches longer than my shoe, which measures 12 inches heel to toe, and about 1 inch wider than my shoe, which measures 4 inches at its widest width. Whatever we witnessed the footprints of was 2 pointed talons on the end of its foot that are isometrically the same with a rectangle-shaped heel. The talons joined on the outside and at the same length in between the talons in each foot. They are 15 inches long, 5 inches wide, with 64-inch stride. I have a 36-inch stride, and I'm 5'10", to give an idea of the possible size of this creature. Running or not, we don't know. I believe we just missed seeing what caused these tracks, and whatever made these tracks was still in the area and possibly watching us. My girlfriend told me to load my pistol and keep it out. I didn't argue. At first she wanted to leave right away, but the sheer adrenaline and interest of what caused the tracks, I believe, is what kept us there. I said, okay, let's get out of here, but again, interest kept us there looking at these tracks. My fear slightly subsided enough to think about the upcoming deer opener, and decided I have a pistol and we'll be okay. I started to walk the same way the tracks went up a hill on the trail, when I stopped and looked back at her while she was staring down at the prints. I said, "Come on, let's get this over with." She caught up to me. As we walked together, she said to me, "If this thing gets a hold of me, put a bullet in my head." I thought about that as we kept walking. We went deeper into the woods down the steep hill where I knew the feed pile was from last year. We got to where I wanted the pile to be. I took the lid off the bucket and dumped the corn and apples out and stepped on the apples. I snapped the lid back on the bucket and said, "Let's go." We started to climb the hill when I realized we were off track. We had to walk left to reach the trail to get back to the truck. I started to think that this is the scariest thing I've ever encountered and felt panic overcoming me. I knew where I was, and finally we got back to the trail and walked down to where we could see the tracks of the creature again. We both stared at them for about 5 more minutes. When we got back to the truck just 20 yards from the prints, she got in and closed the door. I went behind the truck, opened the tailgate, restrapped the bucket down, and closed the tailgate. I got to the side of my truck and took the magazine out of my gun and got in. I threw my headlight off, and as we drove away thinking, and then I said, "I'm not coming back here." She agreed. We were both scared and could not believe what just happened. It was a month earlier and 1.1 miles walking through the woods from where we witnessed the tracks that a different friend and I were camping. I went to bed early and I fell asleep, into a deep sleep. I woke up to a sound of my friend walking behind the tent, and my first reply was, "What are you doing back there?" I woke up a little more and realized my friend was sleeping, breathing kind of loud next to me. I sat up against my gear and grabbed my pistol and flashlight and sat there cold and scared in the dark. I woke my friend up and told him what I could hear, and he said, "It's probably a deer or something." The temperature was around 26 degrees. I looked out at the flaps of the tent and I could see the fire had died down and it was dark out there. I stood up and told my friend that I was going to go to the truck and warm up and get some sleep. I asked him if he wanted me to leave the pistol. He said, "No, I'll be all right." I left the tent and walked to my truck about 80 yards away and started it up to get warm. I turned my lights on a few different times to see if what had walked by the tent was still in sight. I didn't see anything. I turned my truck off and fell asleep. Whatever walked by the tent was bipedal and made 2 steps into my sound rage and then out again. I didn't hear any other noise from whatever walked by. I looked around the next morning for footprints, but leaves covered the ground, and I didn't detect anything. A little more than 2 years earlier, it was summer, and I was at this same location riding my ATV alone. I stopped and got off and walked down to a nearby lake and was looking at the water and how clear it was when I could hear up on the hill above the campground we were staying at a huge tree snap and hit the ground with a big thump as branches snapped off of it and other trees as it fell. I got back on my ATV quickly at the time thinking a bear or a buck was up there, and I was not sticking around to find out. 2 months later that summer I returned to this spot again riding my ATV. I shut it off and stood there thinking about the last time I was here and how I was scared off by something. I was there for about 5 minutes when all of a sudden I could hear branches snapping off trees as whatever was breaking branches was coming down the hill, closer to where I was. I got on my four-wheeler, never returned, until my friend and I went camping a little over 2 years later in October. My first 2 experiences with this creature while I was alone made me think it was possibly a bear or a buck deer. Trouble with that is that I've come up on a bear a dozen or so times, and every time that bear is running as fast as it can in the other direction, and whatever was making tree sounds was not running anywhere. A deer also runs away at the first presence of a human. And now that we witness this creature's footprints, I put the puzzle pieces together and realize that this creature has been living in this area and probably has been for a long, long time. I have learned it means us no harm yet. It only makes a sound when I'm alone. It is always downwind of me. It's out in the day and or night. It can be seen in the dark. It uses the wind to its advantage every chance it gets. It can hear very well. It can smell good as well, too. It waits until we are vulnerable to approach us when there are 2 of us together. I could have possibly have smelled it and didn't know what I was smelling. I put about 4,000 miles in this forest on my grizzly ATV through deep, desolate, thick, wooded swamp lake area, and have now proved to ourselves that this undocumented at the time creature is in fact out here. I know where this creature is living and plan on doing an expedition to prove its existence. I want to document this creature because I feel everyone that enters the forest has the right to know it's there, and for other various reasons. Today's fourth encounter. I was driving north on Craig Lake Road towards Teddy Lake. As I approached Nestoria Road, I noticed something move off the edge of the road into the woods. It was around 6:30 in the morning and a little dewy and foggy at the time, but I definitely saw something move. I stopped at the intersection and watched across Nestoria Road. I first thought it was a moose, but it was far too agile. I took a slow left turn and looked to my right into the woods. I didn't see anything, so I looked forward and sped up. Immediately, this creature ran out of the woods in front of the car and jumped across the road to the south side. I mean, it took 3 long strides and was gone, almost like it vanished through an invisible wall. I was shocked. I continued driving for a few minutes, but had to pull off and stop. I was literally shaking from head to toe. I sat there wondering what it was. It was on all fours and had back legs like those of a large man. It had jet black fur and looked like a very large wolf other than the back legs and the human-like rump. There was no tail. The profile of the head and snout were that of a wolf. Didn't make a sound. I made it to the lake and drove back home in the same direction on Sunday. Today's final encounter. I live in Taylor Falls, Minnesota, and I was driving north on Wild Mountain Road at around 7 in the morning on January 2nd. I was heading for the ski area when I saw some kind of animal running in a field toward the river. I pulled off the road and grabbed my binoculars. It looked like a large wolf, but it was different. By that time, some guy in a truck had pulled up and was wondering what I was looking at. I told him I think there's a large wolf in the field. He got out of the truck and asked to use my binoculars. He said he didn't think it was a wolf, that it looked like it was chasing something. We stood there for a few minutes watching. It would run into the woods, then pop back out into the field for a bit. The light was getting better, so I grabbed my parka and started to walk closer to get a better look. The other guy said he had to leave, but did say again that he did not think it was a wolf. I was about a half a mile from the ski area, near one of those trail roads. I started to walk toward the river. I was about 100 feet from where I saw this creature from the road when I heard an owl screech coming from the woods to my right. On the edge of the woods, this huge dog came running out of the trees. Best way to describe it was that it looked like a huge hyena, but it ran on 2 back legs and bent over. It had woolly black hair all over its body and a long, thick tail. It must have weighed at least 200 pounds, maybe more. I've been in these woods all my life and have never seen anything like this. It looked over at me but continued to run from right to left in front of me. It also made a steady, loud panting sound as it ran. I turned on a pivot and ran out of there, hoping this thing didn't foul me. When I got to my car, an old man had pulled off and was standing there watching me. He wondered what I was doing. I yelled at him, "Get the hell out of here," and said that monster dog was out there. I think he believed me because the look on his face showed fear, like he knew something was already out there. I didn't go to the ski area. Instead, I went back home all shook up and asked myself what I saw. I've read stories about the Michigan Dogman and something people have seen out in Wisconsin. There are no wolves or any other animal native to this area that are that big. I have no idea what I saw. All right, folks, that was tonight's night ending bonus. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. Your support is what makes this channel continue to grow and go, and honestly, what makes it a place for people to want to share their experiences, ideas, and theories. The community you guys have created in the comment section is honestly second to none. is truly amazing, and it's all because of you guys. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless.